Awesome. Well, Chaz, one, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know that you're a busy person. You've got a lot going on, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to be here, man.
Abe, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, I want to jump in on this story because when I decided I wanted to do the podcast, like there were certain people that I knew absolutely had to be guests, and you were in my head from the very beginning because the way that I met you is really interesting. And what's transpired in your life since that moment has just been fascinating for so many reasons. But I remember distinctly, you got hired at Equinox. And after being there a couple of days, like you approached me and you said, "Hey, do you mind if I just kind of pick your brain about like some training things, kind of the ins and outs of being here?" Because it new environment, you had just moved. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I remember we went to the Coffee Bean across the street and we sat down, and like you were super humble, super respectful, and you actually had like you had questions that you were asking like you cared. You were like you wanted to be there. You really did have an investment in like being a trainer and being there. So I was happy to sit down with you. And a couple minutes into the conversation, somehow it came up. I was like, "Hey, why'd you move here?" And you're like, something along the lines of, "I got caught trying to steal a really expensive piece of art, and I just spent 7 years in prison." And I kind of heard that. I just heard it in one ear, out the other, and I was like, "Okay, sure." Like literally, my first instinct was this guy's absolutely full of shit. I got a bad read on this person. I literally don't know anything about them now. And not only were you being like truthful, but that was like the very tip of kind of the iceberg of like this entire story that like later came out. I mean, what was that part of your life like?
That is a deep question and a lot to unpack. So first of all, thanks for kind of recapping how we met.
Yeah.
Uh, it was, first of all, it's an honor to be here and to be chatting with you because I remember you talking about wanting to do the podcast for years now. So
Mhm.
it's really cool that we're now in this space
Well, thank
sharing
you.
a continued discussion. So yeah, thank you so much. It's really cool, and thank you for at the time just your willingness to help a trainer who's just kind of getting started, to help me along because there at Equinox, like you were the guy. So I wanted
Oh,
to
thank you.
pick your brain and learn from you. So thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom.
Of course.
And then
Yeah.
to unpack what you asked about that time, what was that time like? So where do I even start? Where
Well, I
you?
mean, we can go as far
Yeah.
back as you feel, like anywhere. I mean,
Mm.
it is just, it was crazy because we had that moment where you mentioned that. And then you were always a very like calm, cool, collected, and respectful person. You kept your even with the way that you were with your clients, and some of them I was able to work with after you had left,
Mhm.
and you were just very personal with them. They knew you and you knew them on a very deep level, like a real level, that you were invested in each person that you talked to. And
Yeah.
when you said that you were going to leave and you stood up in the meeting and you told everyone, and it was this moment of like, there's no way that this guy's being serious. And you're like, "I'm going to leave. I'm going to pursue my dreams. I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to help get this thing made into a movie." And I was like, "What?" And then lo and behold, so like, I guess, yeah, back to that time, like before you moved to LA,
Mhm.
what was it like? What was it like being in prison? What was it like going through that experience from for those that haven't seen the video, from where you grew up and going into that experience and then moving to LA, and like unpack from any point along the journey?
Sure. So I'll answer the first question that popped up. What was it like in prison? So yeah, my sentence was 87 months, and I spent of that 87 months, I spent 5 years and 10 months in federal prison. I spent 6 months in halfway house home confinement. That's like with the
Mhm.
ankle monitor. And then I spent 18 months on federal probation. And that was after early release because the judge granted me early release from probation for good behavior and all that. But yeah, it was a long experience. Um, definitely learned my lesson. That's for sure. Uh, yeah, and just paid the consequences for my actions and my misguided choices at the time, which we can unpack quite a bit more. But yeah, it was a really challenging experience, as you could imagine. You know, being away from family and friends and basically your entire life up to that point. I was 21. It was 2 weeks after my 21st birthday that I actually was incarcerated. So from the age of 21 to 26, I spent that time in prison, and it was basically my life up to that point just stopped, and prison became where I was living, my environment, and it was a huge adjustment to say the least. You know, I spent kind of the first year fighting it with appeals and thinking like maybe I can get out of here early.
Right.
And that stuff, it's just really hard for anything like that to happen. So after the first year or two, I kind of realized, okay, this is my home. This is where I live now for,
Yeah.
you know, the next at least 5 years or so. So once I started adjusting, it made the time easier. And surprisingly, I actually met a lot of really good people, you know,
Mhm.
just people that were going through hard times that made poor decisions
Right.
and just doing the best they could with whatever their circumstances were. So yeah, I was grateful to make some good friends in there and make the best of the time. I tried to make it as productive as possible, trying to educate myself in whatever ways I could. And yeah, eventually I wrote a book, and the book kind of helped me in a cathartic way express these emotions that I really hadn't dealt with, you know, and that was coming from childhood, basically the teenage years. That's kind of when my life went off the rails. But yeah, trying to rectify all that and take accountability, public accountability for my own actions.
Right. What
So
like
yeah.
when you get into that environment
Mm.
and you talk about this idea of kind of like emotionally you're doing what I think everyone would do is you're fighting it and you're kind of holding on to the hope that this isn't quite how it's going to be. Okay, I learned my lesson. I did. We can stop this train now. I get it. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And now I'm like, let's move on. And then to the moment when you really realize like that's happening. This is where, like you said, this is my life. This is what's going on. How much is fear playing into that experience? And how do you handle that? How do you take that in and not just get really afraid, in all honesty? And like, I feel like it would implode.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it was a lesson in moving to acceptance. You know, things that are hard in life, often when we resist and try to fight against what is and fight against our circumstances, um, it just makes it that much more difficult. So moving to acceptance was a big lesson,
Right.
to just find acceptance for this is my circumstance for now. I can accept it, and by accepting it, I can shift how I experience it, and then also move forward beyond that and make sure that I, never end up in a situation like that again.
Right. And I mean, therein lies a wonderful lesson, right? I mean, how many times in your life have you found yourself reapplying things that you had learned through that time?
Yeah, I mean, infinite. It's hard to even quantify it, but yeah, over and over, and hopefully continuing to evolve those lessons as well, and learn them on a deeper level. Hopefully as I continue to grow as a person.
It's such an interesting thing. Like I think about this all the time, whether it's with athletics, relationships, life choices, whatever. Is the worst things seemingly that are happening to you in the moment really feel like there's no way out. Like it's the absolute worst, and it's so overwhelming in some instances, and the effects it can have on our on our psyche, on our outlook, on our motivation. The list goes on. But I don't have, I can only speak for myself personally. Like, there's not a single negative experience that's happened in my life that I can't look back on in hindsight and realize that it couldn't have happened any other way. There was no other option, because had that experience not happened, there'd be a chip of myself that wouldn't exist as a result of it happening.
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't be who you are today without that experience.
Exactly.
And it sounds like you have a prevailing mindset. And knowing you, I'm pretty positive that you do. You have a prevailing mindset of finding that meaning, even in the situations that are challenging, but finding that meaning and purpose and using it to help you grow.
Yeah. So have you, since, I guess I don't want to jump around too much because there's so much to talk about, but
Sure.
have you found yourself, obviously this experience catapults you really digging deep and writing this book. The book is the catalyst for the film. The film was very successful. Did that create a platform for you where you could then go and, I know you've done a lot of work with like youth and things like that since the film, where you can go and say like, hey, this is real. This is what can happen. Let's kind of talk. What's the experience like speaking with youth about that and sharing that experience to their level, but delivering like the power piece there?
Yeah. It's really rewarding. And that's what I enjoy most about writing, storytelling, is actually relating with people. And it's amazing how many people have reached out and shared their experience, things that maybe they've never told anyone,
Right.
something that they did that they weren't proud of. Yeah, I think when you embrace your truth and you share vulnerably, it invites other people to kind of let their guard down and feel like they can do the same.
Right.
And I think it's sad to say, but I think oftentimes with the youth, I've done work with at-risk youth, especially, and a lot of times they have never experienced that. They've never experienced a safe space to actually feel like they can be vulnerable and let their guard down and say what they're actually going through and what their challenges actually are.
Right.
So yeah, it's been an eye-opening experience, and it's been really rewarding to work with kids in that way. And I think, it doesn't seem to sink in with every kid. Of course, it's
Right.
going through something, but there are those few every now and then, like when I speak with a group, that I can tell it like really impacted them and hopefully shifted their life in a better direction.
That's a tough thing for kids, I think, to, especially if you're in an environment or a setting that kind of hardens you or closes you off,
Hmm.
and then someone saying, hey, it's cool, be, be open. You're
Yeah,
like, the
yourself.
fuck,
Be who
I'm
you
gonna be
are.
open.
All good. Yeah.
Right. Like, how do to build that environment of trust, especially when you have, maybe one or two interactions with someone. But I think you hit a really important point on the head. And this does get, I mean, it goes back to that first interaction. It's like when you open up about things and share stuff with people, it does create it just creates a connection in a way, because in reality, we all go through shit. Everyone
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
varying degrees, right? Some people it's life in prison. Some people it's they just had a bad breakup. I mean, the spectrum of bad experience is so vast, but it's that human experience that you are connecting on. They're like, oh, okay, wow, they've been through that, but they're also willing to share it, which is strange. I kind of trust this person.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
We're all going through different things, each in our own way. And yeah, I just think sharing in that experience, it gives us each a chance to get to know one another, like really know another person, and hopefully grow and learn together.
what was it like meeting people in prison? When you're, I mean, I just can't think of a more interesting environment where you're there for an indefinite amount of time,
Hmm.
not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Uh, kind of inherently that everyone in there is there because either wrongfully were convicted of something they did, or they were convicted of something they did do. And then the range of how bad those things are, again, is massive.
Yeah.
So how do you build trust in that setting?
So yeah, that's a that's an interesting question. So for me, it was basically earning respect, but and I did that a lot through sports, and then just how I carried myself, just
Yeah.
being an honest person, someone whose word that people could actually trust.
Yeah.
That goes a long way in prison. But to share a story about like expectation versus reality in
Yeah.
there,
Please.
in prison, yeah, I was expecting like, I don't know, American History X, like
Right.
all of these films and TV shows that you see about the prison experience. And growing up, till the age of 21, I fancy myself as a tough guy. I
Mhm.
boxed, I did Krav Maga, I
Yep.
did a little bit of judo, and I was kind of a kid with a chip on my shoulder. So I thought I was tough. But then when I actually walked into prison, I recognized I was basically a child in a grown man's world. I was like, oh
Wow.
shit,
Yeah.
this is serious. These people have been prison hardened for years, and
Yeah.
I thought I was tough, but no, they're tough. So they put me in a place called a bus stop, and it's like a room full of 32 people, bunk beds, and
Jesus.
lockers, and it's a pretty small room, like just enough for the little tiny bunks and the lockers, and that's it. But I remember staying there. My first week, I basically just like sat in the bed and meditated or read a book. And I kind of sat up in a corner in this room. That's where my bunk was. And I was just observing, just watching, trying to see like, where
Mhm.
am I? What is this place about? Is it dangerous? So yeah, the after probably 4 or 5 days, uh, this group of guys starts gathering around my bunk, and these are big. All the dudes were black dudes. I'm like at the time a skinny white dude,
Yeah.
and they're just gathering, pulling up chairs around my bunk, not saying anything.
You're on the floor, or you're
I'm
on
on
the
top bunk,
top bunk?
yeah, and they're pulling up chairs, kind of gathering around my bunk, and I'm like, oh shit, is this what you see in the movies? Like, am I going to get jumped? What's going to happen? So I'm getting nervous. I'm like, do I try to fight these guys? Do I run? What do I do?
Right.
And then more gather, and it seems like they're waiting on something or somebody. And finally, this one dude walks into the room, and he's got something like behind his hip as he's walking. And he's light skinned dude with dreads. He's just built with muscle, and his shirt, he's wearing like cut off shirt, and it's in tatters. He's been in prison for years, and I can tell this is the person that people were waiting on. And I'm like, oh shit, here's that moment. What am I gonna do? I'm like bracing myself, and he walks up and he addresses the group, and from behind his hip he pulls out a Bible,
Oh my God.
and these dudes were there for a Bible study, and they would meet there once a week.
No
And it
way.
turns out these dudes were all gang members.
Yeah.
They were tough. This one guy was even a head of a very well-known gang um, throughout the southeast region, and they were just dudes trying to do the best they could with whatever their circumstance was. Ended up playing basketball with that same guy I'm referencing,
Yeah.
and yeah, he later was on my basketball team. Um, yeah, ended up being not what I expected. And that kind of summarizes the prison experience of it
Yeah.
looks this way on the surface, but actually getting to know the people, they're
Mhm.
just doing the best they can.
I love that. My girlfriend says that all the time, that like, you just to remember that most people are, and I mean, ever more apparent right now in the United States, just like the polarity and division within this country. It's heartbreaking on one side, and on the other side, in every instance, that person, with whatever they're equipped with emotionally, physically, mentally, geographically, environmentally, they're doing the best thing that they can with what they have. They are, because okay, there's bad people for sure. There's bad people out there, and bad people want to do bad things. But on a psychological level, even that person, in most instances, is trying to do the best that they know how to do with the things that they have available. And they just have really bad things available, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. To speak to that, I'd like to share one more prison story about that.
Dude, I'm here all day.
Yeah,
You
okay.
can share them all.
So there was this, to speak to your point about about people just doing the best they can, and there's very rarely just bad people. The one person that I encountered in prison that I felt like, wow, he is just, there's no redeeming quality in that person. He's just gone.
Yeah.
There was this guy who he had raped and killed a baby, and
Jesus
I walked
Christ.
in the hallway, and his eyes were just black. There was just nothing behind his eyes. It was like, I don't know, seeing a shadow of a person.
And you're like in the same place.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that just blows my mind. Like on one side, it attempted, art heist and raping and killing a child. It's seemingly that person should be, buried alive in a hole in the ground. That
Yeah.
is just insane to me. But
Yeah.
anyway, sorry, continue.
No worries. So this this guy, I would see him occasionally in the hallways just walking, and his eyes would just kind of be zoned out. And one day at a church service, church service and things like that were open to anyone, and sometimes people were allowed to come up and ask for like a prayer request,
Mhm.
like that. So people would come up to the little podium, and they'd say, "Hey, please pray for this," or whatever. And randomly, this guy shows up, and people are kind of looking like, "Why is this guy here?" And he walks up to the podium, and he requests, well, first of all, he shares his story, and he says who he is and what he did. And he says that he doesn't believe if he ever gets out that he could stop himself from doing it again. So his request was that someone please kill him, because he couldn't control himself if he was ever to get out of prison.
Jeez.
Yeah. So even that person, the the worst of the worst, uh, was still seeking change and redemption. But the only, the best option he had was for someone to just end his life.
I that is wild. That's just so much to digest on that. I mean, what is being in that experience, sitting in the service and hearing that? Like, what is that? What did it feel like when you heard that?
I mean,
Does it get more real than that?
no. I don't think anyone knew what to say. It was just kind of like, okay, like, where do we go from here? I actually don't remember where it went from there, because we didn't have music, didn't have a chorus or anything like that, like a regular church service. Uh, I think it just moved on to the next part of the service, and everyone just kind of watched the guy.
I would imagine that was one of them, a million experiences that you probably had over that 5-year period. When you got out of there, how does what's that transition like, actually?
Transitioning out of prison.
yeah, like when you learn how to live in this environment, it's like you said, it's your home, you're there. You start to trust what are seemingly untrustworthy people. You build relationships, friends,
Yeah.
and then you go back, that's 22, 3, 4, 5, these formative adolescent years, when it's not like you probably get out and then just call your friends from before right away, right? Like how do you how do you get
Yes.
back into it?
It's that was actually in a lot of ways the easiest transition I'd experienced.
Really?
Like uh, going to prison, I felt very out of place in prison,
Mhm.
and that was a really really hard transition to adapt to that. But getting out of prison and re-entering just regular life and society, it was like, oh, okay, I'm home. I can move forward with my life again. So
Wow.
it felt very natural in some ways, but I had picked up some institutional behavior that I needed to unlearn. So, like for example, one of the ways that I adapted to my environment, because there were constantly fights and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, and you had to be ready at any
Yeah.
given moment. So when I would eat in the it's called the chow hall, the dining hall.
Nice. Favorite
The
restaurant.
chow hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I would eat there, I don't know, you get used to being aware of your surroundings and kind of always sitting with your back against a wall if possible. So I found myself when I got out, going to a restaurant, like positioning myself at a table with my back against the wall so that I could see everything. And
Yeah.
then I don't know, after maybe 9 months or close to a year of being back home, I recognized, why am I doing this? What the fuck is this? Why am I sitting with my back against the wall? Like I don't need to be that aware of my surroundings.
Yeah.
So yeah, so little things like that I had to unlearn. But yeah, I was very very ready to just start moving forward with my life again,
Yeah.
and I pretty quickly transitioned into a move out to Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and started pursuing work in the film industry as a writer. And in that process, I also have a passion for just health and wellness and fitness
Yep.
that I had developed in prison.
Yeah,
Because in a
because I
prison,
remember that was part of like you kind of jokingly call it like prison workouts, but a lot of the things you would implement were things that you had learned while you're in there, right? Because
yeah,
I would imagine part of the sanity is adopting habits and routines, right? Where like whatever routine or habit you can create within a setting like that, whether it's your regular church services or exercise programs. And then I think you alluded to this earlier, but like that exchange of respect, you have something to offer, right? You can teach people things, you can train them or something. And so you become somewhat valuable in that setting. So it becomes a trade, right? It's a trade environment. It's like a barter system.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a barter system in there. They use stamps, so stamps are the currency,
Like
like mailing stamps.
email
Yeah,
stamps.
yeah. So at least at the time, um, one book of stamps, so 20 stamps would
Yeah.
equal $5. And
Wow.
they have to be forever stamps. They have to be stamps that you can use at any
Right.
given point. But I wonder if the price has gone up because now stamps are a lot more expensive.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know,
No, but
but
I mean that makes sense because
yeah,
communication is the most valuable currency, right? Ability to connect with the people that are not there with you.
yeah, 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 definitely. So yeah, that's kind of where I grew up in a fitness background.
Mhm.
My family owned gyms, powerhouse gyms,
Yeah.
and I started working out and getting involved in fitness very young. I think at like 12, and I thought I knew what I was doing in fitness, but then living in that environment in prison, uh, health and wellness and fitness, it's one thing that you can control in an environment that you have no control over your life or anything
Totally.
else. So being able to build your body and actually do something that feels productive, it's a
Wow.
huge thing in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really leaned into that, and yeah, because any way that I could be productive in there was great. So yeah, so I adapted a lot of new lessons, and then of course became certified and all that good stuff. And then yeah, wanted to just help people, do what I can to share what I've learned and experienced to make an impact with
I
everything.
I always wanted to ask you this since I saw the movie, and I guess it's more of a two-part question. I guess the first part, and this can be as much of a black and white answer as you can provide. Do you think that the movie portrayed you accurately?
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
was accurate, probably about 90% accurate, and it was a matter of depth. You know, in a film, you only have 90 to 120 minutes to
Right.
share a lot of big ideas in a really short space.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and they told all four stories,
Yep.
uh, each just kind of touching on the surface of what was happening at the time. And I think they did a really good job with that.
Because I was fascinated knowing you, how I met you, and then interacting with you as a coworker, and just general your demeanor and who you are now, right? Very humble, very respectful. And in the movie, you kind of come off as like this brash, cocky kid, right? Who,
Yeah.
and in the moment, I'm like, I always, when I was watching it, I was like, man, I would have loved to have been able to ask Chaz when he got convicted, why do you think you're here? How did you get mixed up on it? And then ask you now in reflection, how do you think, like, what led you to get caught up in that situation? Because from the movie's standpoint, it looks as though you were pulled into it because you had a car and they could rely on you to handle this aspect of the transaction, right? But you didn't necessarily need to be involved as some of the other kids did, right? So how,
Yeah.
in hindsight, like how, what was it that, I don't know if drew you towards it is the right phrase, but
Mm.
what was it that, yeah, drew you into that and got you involved?
Yeah. So that in the film portrayal, that's probably, it falls somewhere in the gray area between that 90 and the 10% as
Mhm.
far as accuracy, because it's hard to really go into the full why of each person.
Right.
Uh, but my why, um, the other guys were kind of planning this for a while,
Yeah.
and they had told me about it. And yeah, like the movie says, I said, that's stupid, you're gonna get yourselves caught, and that kind of
Right.
thing. But then the amount of time that went by, I think it was maybe 9 months total that went by, that they continued planning it and working on it and trying to include me, and I continued saying no. But then I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life and my
Mhm.
family life. It I was actually in business with my dad. I started buying and selling real estate at like 16. Uh,
Wow.
my family was in property management and a bunch of different aspects of real estate. So I wanted to be just like my dad.
Yeah.
So at 16, I pitched him my idea of how by the age of 26 I could be retired. And
I love it. Aggressive.
yeah, yeah, ridiculous looking back, but that was what I wanted to do, and I really I wanted to, in hindsight, I think do that because I wanted to uh, be involved with what my dad was doing, and be a part of that. So yeah, I pitched him this idea: buy two houses a year for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, you sell off the first 10, you pay off the second 10, you own 10 single family homes, free and clear, which becomes an income generating business. So that was the idea, with a significant net worth. At least that's the concept.
Right.
So two 2.5 years into it, we had purchased five homes,
Mhm.
using each home as collateral for the next, and had renters in there paying the mortgages. Then things happened with my family. My parents went through a divorce, and it was a particularly ugly divorce. And I found myself caught in the middle of it, uh, just particularly because my dad and I were in business
Yeah.
together. And then, long story short, what I was basing my future on and not really taking college serious at the time. And to your point, I was cocky and arrogant and brash. I was that character in the film at the time, because life hadn't humbled me yet.
Fair. Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, so what happened with the business with my dad is when finances got tough in their divorce, he sold and refinanced all the homes and took all the money. And all of a sudden I was left with like, well, where am I going now? What's my future look like? And
Right.
it was really immature and misguided, but I felt betrayed. I felt angry. I felt just pissed off at the world and didn't have any idea where to put that emotion in a healthy outlet.
Yeah.
And I went to my friends and said, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it.
So it's
Let's do
almost
it.
like not self-sabotaging, but like retaliatory towards the personal life things that were going on at home.
Yeah, it was self-destructive.
Yeah.
And not only self-destructive, it was destructive to the environment around me and the people around me, which, it's looking back, it was really selfish. To actually open my book with a quote. It was an African proverb, and it said, "If the youth are not initiated into the village, they will burn it down just to feel its warmth."
And indeed you did, right?
Yeah, and I guess in hindsight, I did my best to burn it down. I burned down my world, anyways.
when
And
you when
yeah,
you did go into it, did you feel like uh hey, this could really work? Like was a part of it that it actually might work, or was it kind of like, middle fingers to the family and like more of that?
it was. There was a sense of, hey, it could work
Mhm.
if it's approached in a more realistic manner. So the other three guys, they had been planning and doing what they were doing up to that point. And then yeah, I got involved and I was like, well, let's take a look at this and actually try to pull it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a My mind was just blown. I mean, like seeing it, I felt like when I was watching the movie, like my hands are getting sweaty when they're going in the library. I'm like, I can't believe that this is actually going down. And I obviously had a little bit different emotional investment because I know you. I'm like, oh my God,
Right.
these guys like really think this is insane. And on the flip side, like had it seemed shaky from so many angles, but like had it happened, millions of dollars, I mean, crazy, right?
Mhm.
And then for it to unfold the way it did, I just felt like the movie did such a good job paralleling your individual interviews, you guys kind of talking and showing who you are, the movie showing the course of events, and then everything coming to a head at the end, and just wrapping it up with like, oh my, it was kind of like it wasn't a happy ending, obviously, but it was a
Sure.
real ending, and
Yeah.
you felt it by the time you got there. You were like, wow, this
Good.
is real. So
Yeah.
I
That
guess,
was the intention.
we fast forward quite a bit, and I just love to hear this part because it was kind of my last reference point with you from working together and then seeing this thing actually become like a reality.
Mhm.
And I go back to this meeting, but for those listening, we have like a trainer meeting every month where everyone gets up and they do recognition for performance. And usually if people are leaving, they'll say something. And you got up and you had just like a very heartfelt and real kind of send off of like how great your experience was, how much you valued working with everybody, but that you were going to basically bet on yourself 100%, all your chips in, and go and get this book published and make a movie. And it was one of those moments where you just kind of hear what someone's saying and it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to quit your job and become an actor kind of thing, right? Especially in LA.
Right.
And then lo and behold, like you at that point, so at that point, were you leaving knowing that you kind of had a deal lined up, or what stage were you at with the writing of the book, leaving your job, the film going into production, like that whole experience?
Yeah. So even before I started at Equinox, it was always in process. And I had
Hmm.
been working towards that for years, and I had been meeting with different production companies and figuring out who I actually wanted to work with. And the group that I ended up working with, Raw TV out of the UK, they contacted me very early on, and I had actually said no for like 5 years. And
Wow.
it was getting to the point where I actually felt like I could trust them with at least my part of the story.
Hmm.
And I trusted their vision, and there were still many more hoops to jump through to actually get to the place that it would eventually be greenlit and made.
Right.
But I I trusted that path enough to just take the leap and go all in and go for it.
Wow. And you did.
Mhm.
And then what happened?
So yeah, the film was released, came out 2018 at Sundance. That's where it premiered, and that was a wild experience. Um, Seeing something that I had conceived in prison, like from a prison cell, writing by hand, like with
Yeah.
a tiny little book light, uh, seeing it come to fruition and come to life, this dream that I had worked for and envisioned for years and years and years, sitting in a theater at Sundance with 12, 1,300 people all watching uh, the experience, something that honestly I'm not proud of. So it was kind of like exposure therapy in a lot of ways, just the
Yeah, man, for
experience.
real.
But to be seen and heard for my experience, and recognize that, yeah, I did this thing, but that doesn't define who I am. And through the film, I felt like, yeah, I was able to take accountability and like show the consequences of my actions, but also be seen as a just a human being who is perfectly imperfect and
Yeah.
flawed and trying to do the best that I can. So it was a really unique and healing moment to experience that with a crowd of people, and then just, I don't know, feel recognized for the mistake that I had made, and that I had moved past that and tried to make amends along the way.
And at that moment, like, is that kind of the peak exposure for a film like this? Or how does that how does that play out? Is that the highest moment that you see? Is that kind of the entry point for the film? And then from there, people are like, wow, we got to get this out. People need to see this. This is incredible.
Yeah, so it's essentially that on the festival circuit, it's basically the place to premiere a film and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, this is our introduction to the film." Uh, and eventually, we did a distribution deal with the Orchard and
Yep.
Movie Pass at the time.
Mhm.
It was a co-distribution deal, so they picked it up, and it ended up going into theaters. It did a theatrical run, so we did a premiere in New York. That was a lot of fun. And then after the theatrical run, there was a deal with Cinemax, HBO. I think it's on Amazon now, Amazon Prime,
That's
and,
where we watched it.
and Hulu. Yeah.
Yep. And when that happens, does the spotlight begin to, because I would imagine you're at Sundance, you're sitting there with 1,300 people and you're 13,000 and you're up on stage, you're answering questions and it's kind of everything's in your face. And then as it gets picked up and moved along and into different areas, the spotlight pulls away from you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What's that like?
It was interesting. So to realize something that I had envisioned and dreamed of and worked toward for so long, having that actually happen, once that kind of shifted, I was like, well, what now? Like,
Right.
what am I going to do next? This thing that was uh, so far in the future that I was always working toward. Yeah, what I do now, and where I've landed is, since sharing my story, um, and hoping to relate to other people and whatever their experience is. what I've gravitated toward is helping others now share their own stories. So I do that in several different ways. I work as a co-founder of this group called Writers Incubator, where we incubate writers' ideas, whether it's from book to film or anywhere in between. And we run accelerators teaching writers and storytellers how to share their story and learn the business side of publishing.
Yep.
And I work with a few different projects, either as a ghostwriter, co-author. I've got a book coming out that I co-authored on December 7th. It's
Oh,
called,
awesome.
yeah, it's called Encountering God. I co-authored with this guy who is a papal missionary of mercy. So he travels around and basically tells uplifting, motivating stories, funny stories, sad stories. But yeah, he was appointed by the Pope, and this is sharing his experience. So I ghost wrote or co-authored that. And I've got a few more books in development. One's kind of like the Aaron Brockovich of the auto industry.
Oh, wow.
Pretty cool. It's a cool story. This guy took a couple of corporations head on.
And these are all nonfiction.
Nonfiction. I kind of specialize in nonfiction storytelling. Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's such a special medium. I think it's interesting just at this day and age, like the resurgence and renaissance of audio. You know, there's so many podcasts, and people are willing to sit down and listen to a conversation and hear people just talk for a while. In some cases, is so special. But also that, you know, literature hasn't gone away, and in fact, there's phenomenal literature coming out constantly.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring, because you would kind of think that with the advance of technology and the rise of digital media and everything, that you start to move away from books and literature, but actually it's quite the opposite, I feel like. And then there's always the possibility that a wonderful story does end up turning into a movie anyway, and then you get to experience it in that.
Yeah.
When you bring on, you said it's like an incubator and then an accelerator. So like on the incubator stage, are people coming to you and saying, hey, this is my story, I don't really know how to take it to the next step, I don't have the connections within the publishing world, can you help me? Or are you going out and farming and finding these people and saying, hey, come with us, let us be the people that guide you through this?
Yeah. So at this point, it's all people coming to us. What we are hosting right now, it's an accelerator. So we're in the middle of our third accelerator. It's a 4-week sprint accelerator, where in 4 weeks, we go over the business side of publishing and kind of workshop people's ideas and help them bring that to a presentable proposal stage, where we will help them get placed with an agent and that kind of stuff. And then that story is then presented to starting with the top 5 publishers. So it's presented there, and then just trying to help storytellers and writers find a home for their story.
What are some of the hurdles that they face? I mean, I would imagine that if you have, whether it's a thick manuscript that you've put together on your computer, or you have a refined project, that there's got to be millions of books that go unpublished despite being wonderful. It's like, what are some of the challenges that these writers face, or maybe that you faced from getting your idea to paper, but then really getting it from paper into other people's hands?
Yeah. So one of the first lessons I learned from this, like a small tier publisher that I worked with early on, I sat down with him and I was talking to him about the industry, and I expected that you just write it. You write your story and that's it. And the publisher takes it from there.
Right.
And you just focus on the content. And he kind of gave me a reframe, and he was like, actually, the business of being a writer, the content is about 20%, but the marketing and creating awareness for yourself and in your project, in your story, that's 80%. So
Wow.
most writers and authors don't recognize the business side of the industry, and they just focus on, writing a beautiful manuscript. But what's it mean if no one ever reads it?
Yeah, a travesty. In all
Yeah.
honesty, I remember my grandpa wrote a book called Scudding, which was about his experience
Mm.
being in the Navy and then sailing around the world with my dad and uncle and aunt. And it was about 14 years it took for him to go from like writing it. I think emotionally there was a lot of tough stuff there too, but
Yeah.
it was not an easy process getting it into the hands of other people. And the
Mhm.
amount, I can only imagine the amount of rejection, consistent rejection, right, that you
Yeah.
hear or get from people. It takes a tough attitude to persevere through that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's special that these writers get to work alongside you guys, because I'm sure you can lean on your credibility too, right? Like you've done this, you've
Yeah.
seen something through.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it through, and I even I started out self-publishing. I went the route of self-publishing because I didn't know all the things that I've come to learn after being in the industry. So yeah.
What are some of the pros and cons on that? On the self-publishing or going through a publisher?
So going through a publisher, it's basically like if you have a business and you are working with a collaborative partner,
Yep.
uh, that can be great. But if you are the one doing all of the work, like say for example, you have a large platform and you're able to engage with your audience and your readers yourself, like one to one or in mass, then self-publishing may make more sense.
From a
Uh,
like a cost standpoint, it's just going to be less away from you and less time away from doing what you like, kind of thing.
um, it's really about getting your book and your message to the people that you want to reach. And if you're able to do that without a publisher, then that's okay. A lot of people who do like speaking engagements and things like that, they're constantly interfacing with the people they want to connect with, then self-publishing may work best for them.
Mhm.
Still, if you work with a top tier publisher, they provide a lot of resources, and they really kind of put a megaphone to the message that you want to share. So if you've got a really good publisher who's going to work alongside you and bring at least an equal effort to the project, then it's ideal. We always recommend that people do work with the publisher if they can.
I guess that's kind of like it's like having a property manager or doing all the work yourself, right? Like there's a lot of trade-offs there, but at some instance, I'm sure the reach alone of these publishing houses, if it if your book has that potential, that has to be an amazing way to go because of what they can leverage to get exposure for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you end up publishing a book about training also?
So I've finished it, and I haven't released it yet. I may release it in January, and it's actually called Conviction Fitness.
And
And
it's like a training, like it's a fitness book, or it's a store, like a nonfiction book with fitness mixed in, like a
it's
4 hour
both.
body.
It's kind of both. It's so the way that it is presented right now, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book. So
Nice.
it's a workout uh, guide, like a routine, but it's based on the experience of being in prison. So it kind of walks the reader through the experience of walking into prison, and you've got 8 weeks to basically go through this routine and get yourself
Love it.
out of prison. Yeah,
I love it. I mean,
yeah,
I love it, but I'm also, I love training and stuff like that too. So it really speaks to me. Did
yeah.
when you got into that setting, I mean, Equinox is so funny because it's the polar opposite, right? It's like the bougiest,
Mhm.
most upscale, education based, like go through the curriculum, advance yourself through the tiers, learn more. What was that like, taking like your the knowledge and the understanding of fitness that you learned inside prison, and then going and taking more of this like academic approach to it, and then really spitting out your truly like your own style. I
Yeah.
mean, how different are those two worlds?
Vastly different, but I feel like it's kind of a summation of just who I am as a person.
Mhm.
So being a part of both those worlds and blending it together with a type of fitness and training style, it just, I don't know, it felt very natural because it's kind of rugged and tough. It's that type of training,
Yeah.
but there's also a bit of the refined, more like certified
Right.
structure as well. Yeah.
Not a lot of functional fitness going on, right?
No, not much functional fitness.
Yeah, it's I always think of like who would you want to get in a fight with, like a bodybuilder or a farmer? And
Mhm.
like I would choose the bodybuilder all day, because the farmers they're just strong in a different way. They
Yeah.
throwing bales of hay all day, they're constantly moving, their leverage is different, they're in
Mhm.
weird angles. And when you're strong like that, it's a nasty type of strength. And when you're
Yeah.
bodybuilder strong, you're strong here or you're strong over there, but you're not necessarily strong together. So
Yeah. In the little planes of motion.
yeah. So are you like, do you still train in any capacity, or this is 100% you're like all in, you're the co-founder, this is kind of what you do now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm all in on writing, storytelling, books and film. Yeah, all that
Are
good stuff.
there any film plans in the future? Are you working on anything that you can speak to?
Yeah, yeah. There are a few projects in the works that are in varying stages of development and production.
Mhm.
Um, I won't give any titles right now, but they are two true stories that both have books attached as well. So
Oh,
they are
awesome.
in films. Yeah, and I'm really really excited about these. Both are kind of David versus Goliath type stories, like
Gotcha.
overcoming the odds.
Right up your alley, man.
Yeah,
did did you, when you guys were doing the casting and everything for American Animals, did you get to participate in that?
I did a bit, yeah, but mostly it fell on the director,
Mhm.
and I trusted his vision. But yeah, I was glad that ultimately he chose Blake, and I think
Yep.
Blake did a great job. And especially one pivotal moment in my life, I was really grateful of how I felt like he captured it, and I was able to kind of relive that uh, through his portrayal.
I love that. I mean, you always hear, most of the time, you hear about interviews with the actors, like how did you learn how to play that person, or what did you do? But this is a unique opportunity actually to ask you
Mhm.
what it was like for him to learn how to be you. Like, what did you guys spend time together? I mean, how did they learn to portray you, like you said, in a very short amount of time? I mean, they're
Yeah,
covering a lot of gaps with only, each character only gets what, maybe 10 scenes where it's just them. So
yeah.
to convey you in 10 snippets,
Mhm.
how did he prepare with you for that?
So what's interesting is the director actually made the choice that none of the cast met any of the real people ahead of time.
No way.
Yeah, and
Wow.
because exactly what you said earlier about how, in the film I'm portrayed as kind of brash, arrogant, those types of things, because the director did not want the actors to get to know who we are today, because it he was concerned that it may influence their choices of who
Yeah,
we were back then.
that's fascinating. I
Yeah,
didn't even consider that, but it makes total sense. I mean, if he met you now, it would be very confusing. You're like, what's
yeah,
this really humble, down to earth, caring, like want to do good for the world guy doing, getting caught up in this? So
yeah.
they had no exposure to you guys whatsoever.
Zero, zero. And I think Evan Peters did manage to reach out to Warren, I think by Twitter. He wasn't supposed to, but he did anyways,
Rule
and
breaker.
connected with him just a little bit. But yeah, I think Evan did an amazing job portraying Warren. So whatever he did worked.
And what about it's four of you, I
Yeah.
think, right? Were you guys, because this is, like you said, this is your idea. You write this in prison, and years later, you really like bring it to market via the movie. You obviously have to get their one, consent, but two, the movie shows that you also have to get them involved. Was it difficult to get everyone back together?
So that is actually what the production company did. So the production company, that's not all me. Uh,
Gotcha.
I ended up working with the production company and doing a life rights deal. So
What's that?
so a life rights deal is the uh, option and ability to portray someone's life
Mhm.
through a film. So they optioned my book and my life rights, and for an execution window. So 3 years. I
Yep.
gave them 3 years to do what they want to do with my experience and my story. Uh, and they did the same, something similar, for each of the other guys. So in order to share the film, they had to acquire the life rights of all the real people and share
Wow.
the story. Yeah.
I see. So that's really interesting. I didn't know that that's how that would work. I guess I kind of envisioned the four of you guys getting together and pitching this to a production studio, but it makes way more sense
Mhm.
that they love the story, they love the writing, they want to create this into a film.
Mhm.
They get your rights, and then they now have to get consent from the other people involved. Did you know in the beginning that it was gonna be a film where you were also all interviewed as part of it?
Yeah, that was the director and the producer. That was his vision from the start. And his vision that he pitched the first time was, if you if 10 people witness a car wreck, um, are all 10 stories going to be exactly the same, or is each story going to be from the unique perspective of each individual?
Right.
So he wanted to share this train wreck of an event from four different perspectives, and I found that really fascinating, to really unpack what's true for me may not necessarily be what's true for you,
Right.
because it's coming with an entire lifetime of experience that shapes your perception.
Totally. And I mean, I think that one of the movies that, or one of the reasons that I did enjoy this movie so much, and I found it fascinating, was that there were these undertones. There were these other things going on beyond. Yes, you're watching a story about an art heist. Yes, you're watching kind of the conflicts and the relationships that these four friends are navigating through the process. But then there's also this social commentary going on too about like how things happen. Like you said, how things happen. You take one event, you have 10 people watch it. You don't get 10 same stories, you get 10 different stories. And if you look to anything, be it any kind of recount of what happened in any situation, it is very tough to get what we would even begin to consider like the truth,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And that's important just to digest that as a human.
yeah, yeah. And the story, the film, excuse me, the film, it really explores that
Mhm.
and kind of plays with that concept. Like in one of the scenes, they're in Amsterdam, and one guy remembers there being uh, a red scarf, and the other guy remembers it being, no, it was actually a green scarf, and
Right.
he had long hair. Like, just
And
the
that's
little
where they're like changing him as
yeah,
they cut it. Yeah, I love that. That
yeah,
was great.
yeah. So I really, I gravitated toward that concept,
Mhm.
because I thought it was the ability to share something a little bit deeper than just a story about four college kids who commit an art heist.
100%. And do you guys, the four of you, is there any contact? Did they end up serving similar sentences? Were
Yeah,
they at the movie premiere?
yeah. So we all served 87 months. That was our whole sentence, and of that, we did. I think in federal prison, you have to do think it's 87% of that time.
Each of you individually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 87 months, and then 5 years and 10 months plus another 6, you're still considered in prison because you're in halfway house, home confinement. So yeah, we all did the same amount of time. And then in the film release and all those things, yeah, they were also at the premieres and all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. I mean, I can't imagine. I can only imagine that there's some, trauma associated with that when you all go into the idea together. But I would imagine that there's blame that arises at different points within the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of as you see in the movie, I get really upset at the other guys and also at myself for
Mhm.
my own actions and being involved with these guys in the first place. Yeah, I really just I blew up on them, but mostly just mad at myself. And yeah, it was kind of like a reunion, getting back
Mhm.
together and seeing them, and it was closure in a way, kind of bringing things full circle,
Yeah.
um, and just yeah, kind of wishing the best for all of them, each in their own ways. And right after it, I guess after the crime actually happened, I chose to go my own separate way, and I didn't really stay in touch with them for a long time.
Mhm.
So uh, circling back with the film was kind of a chance to come back together and just see how they're all doing, and wish them all the best.
What's a, I mean, that's a wonderful full circle story in and of itself, that like
Right.
as dire as things can be, they can be remedied too. And that's a great life lesson, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I want to be respectful of your time and also give you an opportunity here. Like, I'd love to hear how people can get involved in what you do, how they can reach out to you or get in contact, or maybe if you can speak a little bit to if there are like writers or artists or people out there with an idea, with something that they've been working on, how can they get it into the hands of the right people? And what are some of your insights or recommendations or motivations for them as artists?
Yeah. So first of all, as artists, as creatives, what's been really helpful for me is to just dig into self and explore what truth is for me, and to learn more deeply who I am as a human being and expressing from that place. That's been really helpful for me, and I think that also helps me to relate my vision of what I'm working on. And that's advice that I would share with other artists and creators, uh, to just express fully who they are through their work. And then on the business side of it, I would suggest mentorship.
Yeah,
Finding someone who's been down the path that you want to go, and learn from them. Just like when you and I sat at the coffee bean
dude.
across from Equinox, I was like, "Yo, you're the guy. Can you please teach me? Show me what you know that has led to success for you as a trainer at Equinox." So the same thing for other artists, creators, writers in the literary side, the film side. Um, to get in touch with me, I'm on Instagram, just my name, Chaz Allen, ChasAllen. And for Writers Incubator, we're hosting an accelerator. I think the next one will be coming up in January 5th. So if you are a writer and you want to learn the business side of publishing and get your book or your idea in front of agents and publishers, please reach out to us. We take a small group each time. Each cohort is about 12 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so we work intensively for 4 weeks with people in the accelerator, and we're excited to be launching a curriculum, like a
Wow.
pre-recorded curriculum where we'll be able to teach all of that just online remotely as well. So the website is Writers Incubator, and Inc is spelled with a K. So writersincubator.com,
Clever.
right?
I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, doing that. And let's see, I'm also on Twitter, not so much. Facebook, the same. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not on there very often. So yeah, or people can even reach out by email. I'm happy to talk with anyone, especially if you've got a project and I can offer any guidance or help along the way. My email is Chaz Allen, CHASALLEN 3 at Gmail.
Excellent. And all this too, if you missed any of that, will be available in the caption for the episode as well. So there'll be links and everything to Chaz to reach out to him for the Accelerator, Writers Incubator. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate your openness. I appreciate your honesty as always. You're humble despite all your successes, and it's nice. It's just nice to have these conversations with people, man. I really do appreciate it.
Dude, I appreciate you. And I really appreciate you welcoming me on. And I love the conversation. I always love chatting with you. I feel like today we've talked a lot about me and my situation and story. And outside of the podcast, I really look forward to catching up and hearing a lot more about you and everything that's going on in
Absolutely.
the world. So yeah, man, I look forward to that.
Well, thank you, Chaz. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother.